The sun had just begun its ascent over the endless expanse of blue, casting golden rays across the gentle waves. Tom, a seasoned fisherman in his late 50s, stood at the helm of his modest boat, the sea breeze, as it cut through the water with familiar ease. Fishing had always been Tom's way of life, a tradition passed down through generations in his family. The rhythm of the ocean, the salty breeze, and the solitude it offered had always brought him peace. But this morning was different. There was an unsettling tension in the air. As Tom prepared his nets, he paused to take in the tranquil scene around him. The cries of seagulls punctuated the silence, and the water shimmered like glass. It was a perfect day for fishing. Yet as he scanned the horizon, a sound unlike any he'd heard before echoed across the waves, a deep, haunting cry that seemed to carry both pain and desperation. Tom froze, gripping the edge of the boat. His weathered face furrowed with concern as he tried to pinpoint the direction of the sound. It came again, louder this time, and his heart sank. It wasn't the cry of a bird or the call of a dolphin. It was something far more intense. He turned the boat toward the noise, his pulse quickening with each passing moment. The cry came again, closer now, and Tom felt his gut tighten. As the sea breeze neared the source, the scene that unfolded before him was both breathtaking and heartbreaking. A massive orca, her black and white body gleaming in the sunlight, was thrashing in the water. Her movements were erratic, her tail slapping the surface with a force that sent ripples across the calm sea. Tom's experienced eyes immediately recognized the signs. She was in labor, and something was terribly wrong. Tom's first instinct was to keep his distance. Orcas, though intelligent and majestic, were powerful predators. Yet, as he watched her struggle, a wave of empathy washed over him. She wasn't a threat. She was a mother in distress, fighting for both her life and the life of her unborn calf. Setting his jaw, Tom maneuvered the boat closer, careful not to startle her further. The orca's cries grew louder, echoing in his ears and tugging at his heart. For a moment, their eyes met, hers dark and filled with pain, his full of determination. It was as if she was pleading for help, and Tom knew he couldn't turn away. This was no longer a routine day of fishing. It was the beginning of a story that would change both of their lives forever. The sea breeze bobbed gently on the waves as Tom brought the boat within sight of the distressed orca. Her massive body rolled erratically in the water, her dorsal fin slicing through the surface before disappearing beneath it again. Every movement seemed labored, each thrash of her tail a desperate cry for relief. The haunting sound of her distress echoed across the open sea, reverberating in Tom's chest. Tom wiped his hands on his worn jeans, his weathered fingers trembling slightly as he gripped the wheel. He had spent decades on these waters, encountering dolphins, sharks, and even pods of orcas before, but never like this. This wasn't just an animal swimming by or hunting. This was a creature in agony. He squinted at the orca's movements, trying to make sense of what was happening. Then he saw it, a faint bulge near her abdomen, barely visible in the waves, but unmistakable to his experienced eye. She was in labor, a pregnant orca fighting against something that was clearly going wrong. Tom's breath caught in his throat. He knew enough about wildlife to understand the danger he was facing. Orcas were apex predators, powerful and unpredictable, especially when in distress. But as he watched her struggle, a pang of empathy pierced through his fear. This wasn't a ferocious predator. This was a mother, fighting for the life of her calf and her own. The orca let out another mournful cry, a sound that seemed to shake the very air. Tom felt his chest tighten. He couldn't turn away, not when the sheer rawness of her suffering was laid out before him. The boat drifted closer, and Tom caught a better glimpse of her eyes, dark, intelligent, and filled with pain. For a moment, their gazes locked, and Tom felt a connection that defied logic. It was as though she was asking for his help, her cries no longer just sounds but a plea that resonated deep within him. "Hang on, girl," Tom muttered, his voice rough but gentle. as though she could hear him. He adjusted the throttle slightly, the boat inching closer. "I don't know what I can do, but I'm not leaving you like this." The closer he got, the more he could see the extent of her struggle. Her breaths came in short bursts, her body heaving with exhaustion. Each movement seemed to sap the last of her strength. Tom scanned the area looking for signs of her pod, but the ocean stretched empty in every direction. She was completely alone. Tom stood at the edge of the boat, his hands gripping the rail. His mind raced with questions. What had caused her to become separated from her pod? Was the calf still alive? Could he, a fisherman with no experience in marine biology, even make a difference? The orca let out another cry, softer this time, almost a whimper. It was enough to make up his mind. He couldn't just watch her suffer. Whether or not he could help, he had to try. "I've got you," he said softly, though his voice was swallowed by the sound of the waves. "We'll figure this out, girl. Just hold on." Tom stared at the thrashing orca, weighing his options. Logic told him to steer away, to leave this to nature or professionals who might never arrive in time. But his heart screamed at him to act. Every second that ticked by felt like an eternity, and the orca's cries only grew more desperate. "This is insane," he muttered to himself, pacing the small deck of the sea breeze. "You're a fisherman, not a hero." But deep down, he knew he couldn't turn his back on her. He glanced at the gear scattered around his boat. Fishing nets, a first aid kit, ropes. Nothing suited for what he was about to do, but it was all he had. He cut the engine, allowing the boat to drift closer. The orca's body heaved in the water, her strength visibly waning. She was struggling to stay afloat, her dorsal fin occasionally slapping the surface as if pleading for help. Tom's hands shook as he grabbed a long pole used for guiding nets. He had no clear plan, but if he could at least calm her or free her from any external obstruction, it might give her a fighting chance. "All right, girl," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Let's figure this out." As the boat neared, the orca turned her massive head toward him, her dark eyes locking onto his once more. It was as though she recognized him, sensed that he wasn't a threat. Tom swallowed hard, feeling a strange mix of fear and awe. The sea breeze rocked gently as Tom leaned over the edge, gripping the pole tightly. He extended it toward the orca, not to prod her, but to test how she'd react. To his amazement, she didn't thrash or pull away. Instead, she remained still, her gaze fixed on him, her body trembling with effort. "I don't know how much I can do," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "But I'll be damned if I don't try." With that, Tom began his careful, daring attempt to help the struggling giant. The orca's cries grew louder, their haunting tones echoing across the open sea. It wasn't just a sound. It was a plea, raw and visceral, that cut straight to Tom's soul. He paused in his movements, gripping the rail of his boat tightly as the cries sent chills down his spine. The sheer emotion in the vocalizations was unlike anything he'd heard before. "Is she calling for help?" he wondered aloud, scanning the horizon. Tom's heart sank as he spotted distant shapes breaking the water's surface. Several orcas circling far off, their dorsal fins rising and falling in rhythm. They seemed hesitant, their movements cautious as if they were waiting for a signal. He realized these must be her pod, but instead of coming closer, they remained at a distance. It was as if they sensed the danger and were powerless to intervene. One of the larger orcas in the group let out a low, mournful call, echoing the distressed sounds of the struggling mother. Tom watched as they swam in a slow, agonizing circle, their frustration evident in the occasional slap of a tail against the water. "Why won't they come closer?" Tom muttered, his eyes darting between the pod and the exhausted orca in front of him. He realized that her thrashing might be signaling danger to the others, a warning to stay away. The primal instinct to protect their young warred with the fear of approaching the vulnerable mother in such a chaotic state. The sight of the pod stirred something deep within Tom. These weren't just animals. They were a family. The orca wasn't just fighting for her own life, but for the life of her calf and the survival of her pod. The mother let out another mournful cry, the sound trembling with exhaustion. Tom felt the weight of her desperation, as if she was pleading with the universe for a miracle. Her movements became slower, more labored, as if she was losing the strength to fight. The pod called back to her, their cries intertwining in a sorrowful symphony. Tom clenched his fists. He wasn't sure if the orca's cries were meant for him, but they felt like a call to action. He had to do something, anything, to help. With renewed determination, he grabbed his net pole and leaned over the edge of the boat, bracing himself for what came next. "Hold on, girl," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the waves. "You're not alone." Tom steadied himself against the swaying motion of the boat, the long pole gripped firmly in his hands. The orca floated just below him, her massive body barely moving as she labored for each breath. Her once powerful tail now drifted limply in the water, a stark contrast to the thrashing from earlier. She was running out of time. "All right, let's figure out what's going on," Tom said softly, his voice calm despite the chaos swirling around him. He extended the pole toward her, using its length to gently prod the water near her body. He moved slowly, trying not to startle her. The orca turned her head slightly, her dark eyes meeting his again. This time there was no fear in her gaze, only exhaustion and trust. Tom's stomach tightened. "She's counting on me," he thought, the realization heavy but motivating. He carefully guided the pole along the orca's side, stopping when he felt resistance near her abdomen. He leaned over the edge, squinting to get a better look. Through the clear blue water, he could see the faint outline of the calf's fluke partially emerging but stuck at an awkward angle. "Breech birth," he muttered under his breath, his heart sinking. He knew enough about marine animals to recognize the danger. A breech delivery in the wild was often fatal for both the mother and the calf. The realization sent a surge of panic through him, but he forced himself to stay focused. "Easy, girl," he said, his voice low and soothing. He used the pole to gently press against the calf's fluke, testing whether it would budge. It didn't. The orca let out a sharp cry, her body tensing in pain. Tom pulled back immediately, his heart pounding. "This is going to take more than just brute force," he muttered. Tom glanced at his supplies, a first aid kit, some ropes, and a small fishing net. None of it seemed adequate for what he needed to do. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, thinking rapidly. If he could somehow shift the calf into a better position, it might give the mother a fighting chance to deliver. The orca's cries pulled him from his thoughts. She was thrashing again, her tail slapping weakly against the water. Tom's jaw tightened. He didn't have the luxury of time to overthink. He had to act. "All right, girl," he said, gripping the pole once more. "We're going to try this again. Just hold on for me." Tom leaned over the edge of his boat, his hands trembling slightly as he reached out with the pole again. The orca's massive form lay still in the water, her breathing labored but steady. For a moment, the wild thrashing that had defined the earlier moments ceased, as if she understood that help was near. "You're a tough girl, aren't you?" Tom said softly, his voice carried by the gentle ocean breeze. He wasn't sure why he was talking to her, but it felt natural. The orca's dark, intelligent eye blinked slowly, watching him. The intensity of her gaze made Tom feel as though she understood every word. "Let's get you through this," he murmured. "You and that little one." The orca let out a low, almost melodic sound, a stark contrast to her earlier cries of pain. Tom paused, startled by the change in tone. It wasn't a sound of distress. It was almost reassuring, as if she was telling him she trusted him. The realization filled him with a strange sense of responsibility. He wasn't just a fisherman anymore. He was this orca's lifeline. Tom adjusted the pole and gently pressed against the calf's fluke again. This time, the orca remained calm, her body motionless except for the rhythmic rise and fall of her breathing. Her composure gave him the confidence to keep going. "You're doing great," he said, his voice steady. "We'll get you through this." As he worked, Tom felt a bond forming, a connection between man and beast that transcended their differences. This wasn't just an animal in need. This was a mother fighting for her life and the life of her calf. And she had chosen to trust him, a stranger in a small boat, to help her. Every so often, the orca would emit soft guttural sounds, almost like a conversation. Tom found himself responding as if the two were engaged in a dialogue of mutual understanding. "You've got to hang in there," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "That little one of yours needs you." The orca's tail twitched slightly, as if in response, and Tom felt a surge of determination. Whatever it took, he would see this through. Tom sat back briefly, his arms aching from the effort. The calf was still stuck, and the situation was too precarious for him to handle alone. He glanced at his radio, the device gleaming in the sunlight. "It's time to call for help," he said aloud, as much to himself as to the orca. He reached for the radio and tuned it to the emergency frequency. "This is Tom Walker, out near Beacon Rock. I've got a situation. There's a pregnant orca in distress, and she's having trouble delivering. I need marine rescue out here ASAP." The radio crackled for a moment before a calm voice responded. "Tom, this is Coastal Marine Rescue. Can you confirm your location and the condition of the animal?" "She's in labor, but the calf is stuck," Tom explained. "I've managed to keep her calm for now, but she's getting weaker. I don't think she can hold on much longer." "Understood," the voice replied. "We're dispatching a team now. ETA is 30 minutes. Do what you can to keep her stable." Tom hung up the radio and turned back to the orca. She let out a soft exhale, her body heaving slightly with the effort. He knew 30 minutes might feel like a lifetime for her, but it was the best chance they had. "All right, girl," he said, crouching at the edge of the boat. "Help's on the way, but we've got to keep you calm until then." He grabbed a bucket of water and poured it over her exposed side to keep her cool. She responded with a low rumbling sound, her eye following him as he moved. Tom continued talking to her, his voice low and steady. "You're not alone in this, you hear me?" he said. "We're going to get you and that baby through this." As he worked, the distant call of other orcas echoed across the water. The sound seemed to energize the mother orca, her breathing growing steadier. Tom realized her pod was still nearby, waiting and hoping for her survival. "Your family's rooting for you," he said with a small smile. "And so am I." The bond between them deepened with every moment, and though the situation was dire, Tom felt a flicker of hope. Reinforcements were on the way, and with a little luck, this incredible mother and her calf would have a fighting chance. The sky, once a bright expanse of blue, had turned a foreboding grey. Tom glanced at the horizon and felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Dark clouds were rolling in fast, and the calm ocean waters were beginning to stir. "This is the last thing we need right now," he muttered, tightening his grip on the edge of the boat. The pregnant orca let out a low, plaintive sound, her body shifting slightly in the rising waves. Tom could feel her distress growing as the water became choppier. He knew that every passing minute brought them closer to the storm, and closer to the point where the orca might give up entirely. "Hang in there, girl," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "We're going to get through this." Tom maneuvered his boat carefully, positioning it between the orca and the incoming waves to shield her as best he could. The boat rocked and swayed with the effort, but he refused to let the worsening weather deter him. He poured more water over the orca's side, speaking to her constantly to keep her calm. "You're doing great," he said, his words barely audible over the wind. "Just a little longer. Help is on the way." The orca's eye met his, and for a moment he thought he saw a flicker of trust, a silent understanding that he wasn't going to leave her side. The first drops of rain began to fall, light but insistent. Tom wiped his face with his sleeve and adjusted the rope securing his boat's position. He knew the storm wouldn't wait, and he had to do everything in his power to keep the situation under control. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the waves grew more aggressive, slapping against the boat's hull. Tom felt the Orca shift again, her massive body straining against the forces of nature and the labor that was slowly draining her strength. "Just hold on," he whispered. "We're so close." As the rain picked up, Tom's radio crackled to life. The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. "Tom, this is Coastal Marine Rescue. We're about 5 minutes out. Hang tight." A surge of relief washed over him, but he didn't let it show. He leaned over the boat's edge one last time, pouring another bucket of water over the Orca and giving her a reassuring pat. "Help's almost here," he said. "You've got this." The Orca let out a soft exhale, her body seeming to relax slightly despite the storm. Tom took it as a sign that she was still fighting, and so would he. Tom's boat rocked violently as the Marine Rescue Team's larger vessel approached, cutting through the choppy waves with precision. The team of marine biologists and veterinarians on board moved swiftly, their bright orange uniforms stark against the stormy backdrop. As the rescue boat anchored nearby, one of the team members, a woman with a calm demeanor and quick movements, waved to Tom. "Are you Tom Walker?" she shouted over the wind. "That's me," he called back. "She's over here. She's in labor, and the calf's stuck." The team wasted no time, lowering a smaller inflatable boat into the water to get closer to Tom and the distressed Orca. The lead marine biologist, Dr. Sarah Greer, climbed aboard with 2 assistants, carrying medical equipment and a waterproof tablet. "Tom, your efforts are remarkable," Dr. Greer said, her voice filled with admiration. "You've kept her alive under impossible circumstances." "No time for praise," Tom replied, his tone serious. "She's weakening." Dr. Greer nodded and began assessing the Orca's condition. Her assistants worked quickly, taking measurements and checking the position of the calf. One of them inserted a small waterproof ultrasound device, frowning as they analyzed the screen. "The calf is breech," Dr. Greer said, her voice grim. "It's wedged at an angle, and the mother's exertion is making it worse. If we don't act fast, we'll lose them both." Tom felt his chest tighten, but he refused to let panic take over. "What can I do to help?" Dr. Greer glanced at him, her eyes sharp with focus. "You've already done more than enough. But stay close. We'll need your boat for stability." The team moved with practiced efficiency, preparing a set of ropes and a harness designed for emergency marine animal rescues. Tom watched as they worked, his heart pounding. Every second felt like an eternity. As the storm continued to build, the team carefully attached the harness to the calf, hoping to gently guide it into the proper position. Dr. Greer murmured instructions to her team, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Easy, easy," she said. "We only get one shot at this." Tom gripped the edge of his boat, his knuckles white. He couldn't do anything more than watch and hope, but he knew he was witnessing something extraordinary. The Orca let out a powerful cry, her body convulsing as the team adjusted the harness. For a moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. "Come on," Tom whispered. "You can do this." The next few minutes would determine everything. The storm's intensity peaked as the rescue team finalized their plan. Dr. Sarah Greer, drenched but unwavering, addressed her team and Tom. "We need to reposition the calf quickly. If we wait any longer, we'll lose them both," she said, her voice firm despite the howling wind. Tom nodded, gripping the edge of his boat. "Just tell me what to do." Dr. Greer outlined the plan. Using a specialized rope attached to the harness, they would carefully guide the calf into a better position for delivery. The procedure was delicate and dangerous. One wrong move could harm the calf or the mother. "Tom," Dr. Greer said, meeting his gaze, "we need you to keep the Orca as calm as possible. She trusts you, and that's critical right now." Tom leaned over the boat, pouring another bucket of water over the Orca's back. "You've got this, girl," he said softly. "Just hang on a little longer." The orca let out a low, guttural sound, as if she understood his words. Her massive body trembled with exhaustion, but her eyes stayed fixed on Tom, a glimmer of trust still visible. The team worked quickly, threading the rope under the orca with careful precision. One of the assistants maneuvered the harness while another monitored the orca's vitals. Every movement was deliberate, every second precious. "Okay, on my count," Dr. Greer said. "We'll gently pull to rotate the calf. Tom, keep talking to her." Tom crouched lower, his voice steady despite the tension. "You're almost there. Just a little more, and you'll see your baby." The orca exhaled sharply, her body quivering as the team began to pull. The rope tightened, and for a moment, it felt like everything would snap under the strain. "Careful!" Dr. Greer shouted, her voice cutting through the storm. "Ease up, slow and steady." The team adjusted their movements, the harness inching the calf into a better position. Tom felt the boat lurch as the orca shifted, her cries echoing across the water. He gripped the side, his heart pounding. "She's holding on," Tom called out, his voice carrying over the chaos. Dr. Greer glanced at the ultrasound monitor, her expression shifting to one of cautious optimism. "It's working. The calf is moving." The procedure took several painstaking minutes, but finally, the calf was aligned. The orca let out a loud guttural cry, her body heaving as she pushed. "We're almost there," Dr. Greer said. "Get ready to assist with the birth." Tom leaned closer, his voice filled with determination. "Come on, girl. You've got this." The team prepared for the final moments, knowing they were about to witness something miraculous or heartbreaking. The storm raged on as the orca gave a final powerful push. Suddenly the calf emerged, its tiny body slipping into the water. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The calf floated motionless, its black and white form eerily still. Tom's heart sank. "Is it—" he began, but Dr. Greer interrupted. "Not yet!" she shouted, springing into action. The team moved quickly, guiding the calf to the surface and stimulating its blowhole. Dr. Greer placed her hands near the calf's chest, applying gentle pressure to encourage its first breath. "Come on, baby," she murmured, her voice soft but urgent. "Breathe." Tom leaned over the boat, his hands trembling. "You can do it," he whispered, his voice cracking. The orca mother let out a mournful cry, her massive body trembling in the water. Tom reached out, his voice breaking with emotion. "Your baby's going to be okay," he said, more to himself than to her. Finally, a faint spurt of water shot from the calf's blowhole. The tiny creature twitched, its small flippers moving weakly. "He's breathing!" one of the assistants exclaimed. Tom let out a shaky laugh, tears streaming down his face. "That's it! You did it!" The calf began moving more, its small body bobbing alongside its mother. The orca let out a series of soft clicks and whistles, nudging her baby gently. The rescue team stepped back, their work done. Dr. Greer wiped her face, her expression one of relief and triumph. "It's a miracle," she said, looking at Tom. "You saved her. You saved them both." Tom watched as the mother and calf swam together, their movements synchronized despite the rough waters. The sight filled him with a profound sense of awe and gratitude. As the storm began to ease, the rescue team started packing their equipment. Tom remained by the edge of his boat, watching the mother and calf with tears in his eyes. "You're going to be just fine," he said softly. "Both of you." It was a moment he would never forget, a reminder of the power of compassion and the incredible bond between humans and nature. The storm had quieted to a drizzle, but the tension in the air was palpable. The mother orca let out a long, mournful cry, her body pressing gently against her calf. She nudged it repeatedly, her vocalizations echoing with desperation across the calm sea. Tom's heart clenched, Despite their efforts, the calf remained weak, floating beside its mother. "Come on, little one," Tom murmured, leaning over the side of his boat. "You've made it this far." Dr. Greer and her team watched anxiously, their tools ready in case the calf needed further assistance. The mother orca swam in tight circles, occasionally nudging her baby as if urging it to move. Her large, soulful eye briefly met Tom's, and he swore he could feel her plea for help. Then, a miracle. The calf twitched. Its tiny flippers moved, tentative at first but growing stronger with each motion. A faint spurt of water shot from its blowhole, followed by another. The mother orca let out a jubilant series of clicks and whistles, her massive body arching in excitement. "It's alive!" Dr. Greer exclaimed, her voice breaking with emotion. Tom wiped a tear from his face, laughing in relief. "That's it, little one! Keep going!" The calf began to swim, its movements wobbly but determined. It stayed close to its mother, who hovered protectively, guiding it with gentle nudges. The sight of the two orcas together, the calf now breathing and moving, filled the air with an overwhelming sense of triumph. Tom sat back in his boat, overcome with emotion. "She did it," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. "She really did it." The team cheered quietly, their exhaustion giving way to joy. The bond between the mother and her calf was evident in every movement, every sound. Tom felt like he had been given a front-row seat to something truly extraordinary. "She never gave up on her baby," Dr. Greer said, her voice thick with emotion, "and neither did you." Tom nodded, watching the mother orca's sleek body glide through the water, her calf close behind. It was a moment of pure resilience, a testament to the strength of a mother's love. The calm sea rippled with activity as the mother orca and her calf swam together, their movements synchronized. Tom noticed a distant sound, faint clicks and whistles that grew louder with each passing moment. Dr. Greer adjusted her binoculars, scanning the horizon. "It's the pod," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "They've been waiting." Tom turned, his breath catching as he saw the shapes emerging from the distance. A group of orcas approached, their dorsal fins slicing through the water. The pod swam cautiously at first, their vocalizations resonating like a symphony across the sea. The mother orca let out a series of calls, her voice rising and falling with emotion. The pod responded in kind, their clicks and whistles intensifying as they drew closer. It was a conversation filled with joy, relief, and celebration. Tom watched in awe as the orcas encircled the mother and calf. The larger members of the pod seemed to examine the calf, nudging it gently as if to welcome the newest member of their family. The calf responded with soft chirps, its tiny body dwarfed by the adults around it. "It's incredible," Tom whispered, barely able to contain his wonder. "They're celebrating." Dr. Greer nodded, her eyes glistening. Orcas are incredibly social creatures. This reunion, it's everything to them. One of the larger orcas swam closer to Tom's boat, its massive eye briefly meeting his. The orca let out a low, melodic sound, almost as if acknowledging his role in saving the calf. Tom felt a lump rise in his throat, overwhelmed by the moment. The pod began to move in unison, their sleek bodies creating ripples that shimmered in the evening light. The mother and her calf stayed at the center of the group, protected and cherished. It was a sight Tom would never forget, a family reunited against all odds. As the pod swam away, Tom stood silently, his hands gripping the edge of his boat. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for witnessing the reunion, but for being a part of it. "They're going to be okay now," Dr. Greer said, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Tom nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the pod was disappearing into the distance. "Yeah," he said softly, "they're finally home." The days following the miraculous rescue stayed with Tom like a vivid dream. Every time he closed his eyes, he could hear the melodic calls of the orcas, feel the weight of the decision to help, and see the fragile calf taking its first breaths beside its mother. Sitting on the weathered dock of his fishing boat, Tom stared out at the horizon. The vast ocean, once just his livelihood, now felt like something far greater, a living, breathing entity that connected all life. "This world's bigger than any of us realize," he muttered to himself, his thoughts heavy with newfound understanding. The experience had transformed him. The old Tom, driven by routines and survival, now felt a deeper responsibility toward the creatures that shared his ocean. He decided it wasn't enough to go back to his regular fishing routine. He needed to do more. Tom reached out to Dr. Greer and the Marine Rescue Team, offering to assist with conservation efforts whenever possible. They welcomed him enthusiastically, knowing his first-hand experience with the orca would resonate deeply with others. He began speaking at local schools and community events, sharing the story of the mother orca and her calf. "They're not just animals," he would say, his voice tinged with emotion. "They have families, feelings and bonds stronger than we can imagine. If we don't protect them, we lose something irreplaceable." Word of his actions spread, earning him a reputation as a humble protector of the ocean. His fishing practices shifted too. He implemented sustainable methods, ensuring his nets wouldn't harm marine life. He encouraged his fellow fishermen to do the same, emphasizing the balance between earning a living and preserving the environment. The change in Tom's life wasn't easy, but it was deeply fulfilling. Every day he felt a quiet satisfaction knowing he was making a difference. The ocean had given him so much: his livelihood, his peace, and now a purpose he hadn't realized he needed. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm for Tom. His mornings were still spent at sea, but his focus had shifted from catching fish to observing the wonders around him. The ocean had become his classroom, and every ripple and shadow told a story. One crisp morning, Tom was pulling in his nets when a familiar sound broke through the tranquil silence. He froze, his heart skipping a beat. It was the distinct, melodic call of an orca. "Could it be?" he whispered, peering over the side of his boat. And there they were, two sleek, black and white forms cutting gracefully through the water. The mother orca, unmistakable with her distinct dorsal fin, surfaced just a few yards from Tom's boat. Beside her swam the calf, now larger and full of life. Its playful energy was evident as it leapt out of the water, splashing back down with a joyful twist. Tom laughed, a sound full of surprise and delight. "You came back," he said softly, as if speaking directly to them. The mother orca swam closer, her massive body gliding effortlessly beneath the surface. She rose slightly, her dark eye meeting Tom's. It was a moment of recognition, as if she was thanking him once again for his part in saving her baby. Tom felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the connection. The calf, brimming with youthful exuberance, swam circles around its mother before leaping high into the air once more. The display felt like pure gratitude, a celebration of life that Tom had helped make possible. Tom knelt at the edge of his boat, reaching a hand toward the water. "You're both doing well," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "That's all I could have hoped for." For what felt like hours, the orcas lingered near his boat, their presence filling Tom with a sense of peace and fulfillment. When they finally began to swim away, the mother orca let out one last call, a sound that seemed both a farewell and a promise. Tom watched them disappear into the horizon, his heart full. He knew their paths might never cross again, but the memory of that moment would stay with him forever. The ocean, once a vast and indifferent expanse, now felt like a friend. And Tom, once just a fisherman, had become a guardian of its wonders. Tom's story began as an extraordinary tale whispered among the fishermen in his coastal village. Over time, it grew into a beacon of inspiration that transcended the shores of his small town. The mother orca and her calf became symbols of hope and the enduring connection between humans and the natural world. Tom found himself at the center of a movement he never anticipated. Dr. Greer invited him to speak at marine conservation events, where he recounted his story to captivated audiences. He wasn't polished or practiced, but his raw emotion and genuine passion resonated deeply. "I'm just a fisherman," he would often say, "but out there on the water, I learned something that changed me forever. Every life matters. Sometimes all it takes is one moment of courage and compassion to make a difference." Tom's story gained traction, appearing in local newspapers, then national outlets, and eventually global conservation forums. Footage of the orca calf leaping joyfully beside Tom's boat went viral, igniting conversations about the importance of protecting marine life. Inspired by his experiences, Tom partnered with Dr. Greer and other marine experts to launch a community-based conservation initiative. Together, they created programs to educate fishermen about sustainable practices, reduce plastic pollution, and advocate for the protection of marine mammals. The initiative grew rapidly, drawing volunteers, donors, and activists from all walks of life. Tom's authenticity and humility became the driving force behind the movement. He never claimed to be an expert, but his heartfelt storytelling and genuine care for the ocean inspired others to act. Schools invited Tom to speak to children, where he shared the story of the orca he saved. He showed them pictures and videos, encouraging them to see the ocean not as a distant expanse, but as a home filled with life worth protecting. "The ocean isn't just water," he would tell the wide-eyed students. "It's a world of miracles, waiting for us to care."